Welcome into Before the Basket. I'm Kara Adams, joined alongside Zion Brown. Zion, how are you today?
I'm good, Kara. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. Our first episode in a couple of weeks. Glad to be back.
Yeah, it sure is. First episode of the new semester here back at IU, and yeah, we're getting ready to talk some hoops.
And our final semester at IU. I'm sorry, Zion, I have to throw that in there.
Make me cry over here, Kara.
All right, well, let's get right into it. So IU, really up and down past couple of weeks in terms of games and stuff, and those two 25-point losses at Iowa and then against Illinois at home, followed by a bounce-back win against Ohio State in overtime in Columbus, and then another road loss at Northwestern. But let's go back to those two 25-point losses games. What are your thoughts from those games?
Yeah, when I look at the Iowa game, I look at that game, and I was there for us at IUSTV, and it just felt like a game that Indiana was outpaced in really throughout the whole time. They were outconditioned, and Iowa really took advantage of that all throughout the game. A lot of turnovers for Indiana led to transition points for the Hawkeyes, and that just unraveled and got out of hand so quickly. And then the Illinois game, it was just an ugly scene. I mean, you heard the Fire Mike Woodson chants here in Assembly Hall, and it was just not a pretty scene. Illinois' offense just felt like it couldn't miss anything in the first half, and Indiana had no real answer or response at any point in that game. So those back-to-back losses really put a damper on what was kind of an upward trend that Indiana had going on after beating Penn State and beating USC and Rutgers as well at the start of the month. But those losses kind of downplayed those wins, and now it's a weird spot, like you said. It's in way up and down for the Hoosiers.
Right, certainly, and just kind of weird couple games with those two back-to-back 25-point losses. You're going on the road in Iowa. You don't necessarily expect them to come out of there with a win, but you don't expect it to be that ugly.
Right.
And then similar at home, it just was almost surprising that it was that bad. And even kind of in the second half, when they would start to show like glimmers of hope, they cut it to 18, and then they could just never get over that hump and just were unable to find a way. And it was a pretty ugly scene, like you said, in Assembly Hall. But let's move on after that. So then they go to Columbus and Ohio State, control majority of this game, and then give up poor defense in the last couple of minutes, which sends them to overtime. They get a win. Anthony Leal comes up big for the Hoosiers in the last couple seconds with that block. So what does that just say about senior leadership on this Indiana team in big moments like that?
That was one of the few moments, or one of the moments you saw that senior leadership come up for Indiana. Like you said, Leal, I don't think he scored in that game, but he had the big block that really sealed it. And then the two leading scorers were Luke Goody and Umar Ballo, guys that have been around, that have played high-level Power 5 basketball elsewhere, and we're really expected to help IU become one of those, top 20, 25 teams. We know it hasn't been that, but against the Buckeyes on that night, those were kind of the three guys that were able to get IU over that hump and to beat a solid team, a team we just saw beat Purdue on the road.
Right. And then they go up to Northwestern, up to Evanston, and a game that was back and forth for the majority of it. Indiana's led at some points. They were in it the whole time, and then things just kind of fell apart for them. What went wrong defensively in that one?
Yeah, it was a three-point defense. When you allow a team like Northwestern to make 9 threes in the second half, a Northwestern team, it's not necessarily a great shooting team. It's defense, and they just weren't there on a lot of those off-ball screens and those pin downs. And give props to the Wildcats. I know Ty Berry did a really good job of reading a lot of those screens and being able to settle in and just find those open gaps in the Indiana defense. But at the same time, that's just not how you expect that game to go, right? You expect that game, if Northwestern's going to win it, to be a little uglier than it was for the Wildcats. And in the second half, they really had no struggles putting the ball to the bottom of the net.
Right, and that loss puts Indiana at 4-3 into January. So when we come back, we'll preview Maryland. Indiana will be back at home this Sunday, hosting the Terrapins. And we come back, we'll also be joined by Zach Browning, one of our fellow students, and beat writer for Rivals. Don't go away yet. Welcome back into Before the Basket. We're joined by Zach Browning, senior beat writer for Rivals. Zach, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
We're happy to have you. But let's get right into it. Indiana, Maryland, both these teams need a Big Ten win. Now, both these teams have some pretty strong bigs. Maryland's Derek Queen, Julian Reese, Indiana's Umar Ballo, and Malik Renew. We'll see if he's healthy and how he's feeling Sunday. But if we have those matchups, what can we expect from those?
You're going to expect a lot of inside basketball, a lot of domination in the paint or attempted domination from both teams in this one. If you look at Indiana, Malik Renew, Umar Ballo, the story is there. They love to get the ball down low. Maryland's slightly different because they don't like to get the ball stuck down low in the painted area. If that ball goes inside to Derek Queen or Julian Reese, they love to get that ball back outside, play some inside-out basketball, and get the ball out to their open shooters. We could see Indiana flip their matchups as well in this one, potentially seeing Malik Renew take a little bit more of a perimeter-oriented guy in Derek Queen. Umar Ballo maybe on the more post-oriented guy in Julian Reese.
Right. Well, we will see what both coaches decide to do on Sunday. But moving into that, both these teams have struggled late in games. Maryland's lost some close ones, so has Indiana. But what will it come down to for Indiana to win this game?
It's all about consistency for Indiana. The Hoosiers have not been consistent all season. I've said it, they've been consistently inconsistent. That's kind of been the theme for Indiana on the year. They've got to find a way to put maybe not even a full 40 minutes together. It doesn't have to be a perfect game for all 40 minutes, but somewhere along the lines of 35 minutes. They just can't blow another game down the stretch. They had opportunities to win against Northwestern. They didn't do the things necessary down the stretch, though, to win that game. They've got to play consistently for 35-plus minutes against Maryland.
Certainly, consistency has been such a big storyline for Indiana, and even before the season, prior to Big Ten play, just Indiana can't lose 2 back-to-back Big Ten games. But we've already seen them do that with Iowa and then Illinois. And kind of going into that, a little more into that Illinois game, it was an ugly scene, as Zion and I mentioned earlier. Lots of boos, fans walking out. But so how important is this Maryland game on Sunday to kind of regain Indiana fans' trust in this team, and just for Indiana themselves to regain some confidence going into the rest of Big Ten play?
Well, Kara, I think it's massive. I mean, if we think back to that last time Mike Woodson and this Hoosier team was inside Assembly Hall, it was a 25-point blowout. They were getting booed off the floor in their own building, a historic loss against Illinois. So I think it's massively important to kind of get back on track and put a good product out there for the fans that show up at Simon Scott Assembly Hall on Sunday. It's going to be important. Mike Woodson is going to have to put out a team together that can play well and play throughout entire, again, as I said, 35-plus minutes, because this is a massive game for Indiana coming up with the stretch of games that they have after this Maryland game. It doesn't get much easier in Big Ten play for Indiana coming up. No,
it certainly doesn't. But with that, Zach, what are your score predictions for this one on Sunday?
You know, I've gone back and forth on this one because Indiana's the team. They can lose to pretty much anybody in the conference. They can also beat almost anybody in the conference on any given day. But I think that Indiana's going to come out. We saw it with Luke Goody in that Ohio State game right after the Illinois game. Luke Goody, Mike Woodson, they got their team ready. They, as Luke Goody put it, wore the jersey with more pride against Ohio State. I think we see that type of performance after a loss against Northwestern. I think Indiana bounces back. I'll say Indiana wins 73-67.
All right, I'm going to go with Indiana, too. I think they know that the team knows they kind of need a big, solid win at their home court. It's always been so huge for Mike Woodson. Defend the home court, which we haven't always seen, as we've mentioned a couple times. But so I'm going to go with Indiana, too. I'm going to go 77-74. Comes down to a close one, but Indiana pulls it off. But, Zach, thank you so much for your time today. And with that, that'll do it for another episode of Before the Basket. Be sure to follow along with us on IUSTV Sports for all the updates on men's basketball. Thanks for watching.